My name's Joel Sherman. I'm with Evan Schwartzmiller, and this is the Invent Podcast. On today's episode, we take a little bit of a different approach. We talk about the three kinds of relationships that are important for growth: a friendship, a mentor, and a student. We then shift gears a little bit and talk about the ways in which different cultures approach relationship building and how we can learn from them. We close by talking about the art of active listening and the importance of reflecting on what people say before we respond. We hope you guys enjoy. Okay, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Invent Podcast. I hope you guys are all having a great Wednesday. Today we're going to be talking about relationships and the three kinds of relationships that you need in your life. And to briefly go over those, the first one is a friendship, someone who's on the same level as you. The second one is a mentor, someone you can learn from. And the third relationship you need is a student, someone you can act as a teacher or mentor for. So let's just jump right into the first one, the friendship.
Yeah, so, we're going to go right into it. On a very basic level, a friend, someone who's on the same level as you, someone who's there for you, no matter what happens, someone you can have fun with. When you hear a friend, the basic things you think about, having fun, going to do things together, stuff like that. It's very important to have someone like that in your life. It can be multiple people. It can be one person. In our society, there's always like that best friend, it's very important to have someone in your life like that who understands you, who gets you, and who knows you for who you are.
I think that the biggest thing that I took away from understanding this was this type of relationship is someone who you can share your successes and failures with. So this is like somebody who you celebrate with when you achieve something or accomplish something or get into something or whatever. And it's also somebody who can bring you up when you're failing, when you are down, and say something doesn't go your way, you can confide in that friend to, help you out. And it can go both ways. You need the friend to be there for you and celebrate with you, and you need to be there for somebody to celebrate with and bring them up when they fail. And I know for us, when we run the 100-mile race together, a friendship, our relationship is this type of friendship. We are on the same level in life, and we're both pursuing similar things. And for example, on the 100-mile race that we're going to run together, we're going to need to have each other's backs. When one of us is down mentally, the other one's going to have to bring them up, or vice versa.
Yeah, a friend is someone who you're willing to kind of expose yourself to, someone you're willing to let know what's really going on. And a friend is someone who's going to take that information and help you out. They're going to be someone who's, like you said, got your back, someone who's there for you. And it's very vital to have someone like this in your life. It's easy to go about your daily life thinking you're alone. Especially in our modern culture, we have all this social media and stuff, but it's even though we're in contact with so many people throughout the day digitally, it's important to have someone there with you physically, someone there, who you can talk to, without, going over a phone or something like that.
Yeah, being alone, either physically actually being alone or feeling like you're alone, is a very strong emotion that can be overwhelming at some times, and having a person with that friendship aspect is super, super important. And it'll help you out, I think, with exactly what you're saying, relying on people, confiding in other people, being there and exposing. And the word that comes to mind when I think of all this is vulnerability. And I think that has a specific connotation in our society that it shouldn't. I think that vulnerability actually breeds success. I think that being able to open up about what you're feeling and how you're feeling and exposing it to other people not only allows you to be real with yourself and address that situation, but it might seem like weakness, but in reality it's you working through a problem.
Yeah, it's you building trust with that person. And that's another huge thing. You have to be able to put your trust into this person, that they're going to be there for you. And it's give and take. You have to be there for them. It's never a healthy relationship when, they're the only one helping you out and you're just kind of there thanking them. You have to return the favor. You have to be there for them in return. And if you can keep this healthy balance, it's going to be a long-lasting relationship. And, a good friend is something of immense value. It's it's really amazing what a good friend can do. Yeah.
And with that, I think we can go on actually to the second relationship, which is a mentor. The importance, I think a lot of people understand the importance of a mentor, but I think it's important to just kind of drive home that point of having somebody who you can learn from. And I think there's a lot of misconception about mentors, that it can only be a person or a teacher in your life, like a professor or your parent or somebody above you. And while it's true that this person needs to be ahead of you in life, more experiences, more success, whatever, you can get advice and guidance from whatever you can. And luckily for us, in this day and age, we have access to podcasts and books and talks, and all of those things can act as mentors for you. You don't actually ever have to meet a mentor in person. And for me, I see those like watching the Joe Rogan podcast or the Jay Shetty's On Purpose podcast, or listening to a keynote speech by Les Brown or Eric Thomas. All these people are mentoring me in a way. And while I might not ever get the chance to interact with them and learn from them and have them tell me specifically certain things based on my life, I'm still learning from them.
Yeah, and you touched on it there. It can be a peer. It doesn't have to be someone who's older than you, you know, when it comes to years. It can be someone who's the same age as you. It's just that they have to be able to share their unique experience, and you have to be able to humble yourself. You know, in our day and age, it's very easy to think you know everything. I mean, that's always been the case. You know, people tend to, you know, believe that they know everything. But it's you need to have that humility to say, this person can teach me something. This person can give me information that'll help me on later in life. And being able to say, you know, this person's my mentor is, it's not a bad thing. You know, learning new things is great. It's a misconception that, you know everything, because you don't. You know, no one knows everything. Everyone has something they can learn.
And I think what I just took away a little bit from what you were saying there that I haven't really thought about before is that aspect of learning from somebody who, they don't have to be older than you or more. I think that they have to be ahead of you in the aspect that they're teaching. And what I mean by that is, if I'm out of shape and I want to start lifting weights or getting in shape or whatever, and somebody who's my peer who works out all the time, eats healthy, does all these things, they can take on a role of a mentor for me, and I can learn from them in that regard. They have to be ahead of me in the aspect or avenue that I'm trying to pursue. And I think that that's what separates this friendship from this mentorship, is that a friendship in the avenue that you're talking about is this person's on the same level as you, but a mentor, this person is farther ahead than you, and they know more and they're more experienced.
Yeah, with a friend, you're able to almost do the journey together, whereas a mentor, they're the one guiding you through. They're the one leading you through this journey, whatever that may be. Yeah, a mentor is someone, you know, when you think mentor, you think teacher, and there's always that power dynamic, you know, that the teacher is above, you know, like the authority pyramid. You know, this doesn't have to be the case. Like we were saying, this can be a peer, this can be someone, you know, who you consider yourself friends with. But like we've been hitting, it's someone who has knowledge that you don't, and that you need to be able to recognize that fact. And that can be hard to do, you know, especially when you're getting into something new. You know, it's very easy to go in thinking that you have nothing to learn.
And I think that it's a super interesting like concept, and I really encourage people to go out and find a mentor role. Or somebody who fulfills that role for them. And luckily for us, we have access to like professors on campus and other people like our parents. We have good relationships and connections with those people. But I encourage anybody who's listening to go out and find people who they can learn from in whatever thing they're interested in. And for me now, and for you now, you know, we're getting into this rock climbing, and we can always find people that are more experienced than us that we can learn from. And it doesn't have to be like a full-on, what you were talking about, master-apprentice scenario, because I think that is also a big like kind of stigma or paradigm that comes with the concept of a mentor. It doesn't have to be that. It can be little quick things that somebody tells you that to improve a little bit. And I think capitalizing on anything that you can to help you learn and grow is kind of what falls under this category of a mentor.
Yeah, I know when I first went into high school, I did cross country. starting freshman year, and I became very close with my teammates. They were my friends, really good friends. But the older ones, they were also my mentors. They were the people who I listened to, who I learned from, because they had more experience. We had fun, we had laughs, but at the same time, if I had a question about running or even like a course, if I was going to a new course, I'd say, hey, what's the deal? How do I approach this? And they were always the ones to guide me through that process. And even when I was a junior and they were seniors, there was still that expectation that if I went to them with a question, they'd help me through it. And that's where it's good for them to also be my friend too, because you're willing to go to them and ask them these questions. That was just one experience I had.
And I think that with that, what you were talking about with the friendship and the mentor, which I was actually going to bring up with our next section, but these things can overlap. Mm-hmm. These relationships can overlap. You can be a friend and a mentor to somebody at the same time. Like you were saying, you were going to your friends and asking for advice because they knew something that you didn't, or whatever.
Yeah, these positions are malleable. It's there are going to be people in your life who are strictly mentors and who are strictly friends, but very often these positions change. These you view them differently according to the situation, and it's constantly changing. It's not like they're going to put on their mentor cap. Okay, now you have to listen to me. This is going to be situational. 1 minute you're laughing and you're joking, and then the next you ask them a question, they're there teaching you. It doesn't have to be so formal. I guess it's very, very liquid.
And I think we should actually go ahead and talk about the third relationship, because I'd like to really get into this malleability of these relationships a little bit more, and I think it'll be a little easier once we talk about the third role, which is a student. You need to be a relationship with somebody who you can teach something, and it kind of brings this whole idea full circle. It's one of the best ways to master your craft or your learning. It's to teach somebody else. And for me, that means keeping track of the things that I learn in class, or the things that I study, or the things that I read, and anything that I'm kind of interested in, and I tell somebody about it. I can't tell you how many times that Evan and I will be just sitting in our room and we'll be talking, and we'll say, oh, this thing I learned in class, let me tell you about it. And then I'll teach it to him, or he'll teach it to me, and then we'll analyze it, kind of critique it, and then we'll kind of have a better understanding of it, both our personal perspective, but we'll also be able to remember it better as we're learning.
Yeah, having that, having you can teach to is very important. But it's also important to not get ahead of yourself, not think you're the authority in this situation. You want to talk with confidence, but you don't want to put yourself in that position of power, because if you continue to do that, you lose your credibility in a way. You just become this person who's always telling people what to do. It's important to give advice and not commands. I think that's important. That's an important distinction you need to make.
You also want to be careful about ignorance towards this. Mm-hmm. One thing Socrates actually taught was that the worst kind of ignorance is knowing something that isn't in fact actually so, meaning you are 100% convinced that you know this knowledge, but it isn't the truth of the matter. And that's a pretty philosophical idea, but in real life, for example, my little brother comes to me and asks me to help him with his math homework, and I teach him how to do it one way, and I'm 100% sure that I'm teaching him how to do it the right way, and in fact I'm incorrect, and that he doesn't know how to do it the right way. And that's kind of that logic applied to a real life situation. And I think it's important for people, when trying to fill this mentor role themselves, having a student mentor relationship and you be the quote unquote authority figure, to understand that you need to be 100% sure of your teaching before you actually go and explain it to somebody. And then this kind of brings back in that malleability a component of this, where it's kind of like, for example, me and you, when we were talking about the things that we learned, we're kind of exploring this idea of these concepts rather than I'm teaching you this is how it is. It's kind of we're trying to find the answer and our perception of something that we've learned as we teach and talk about it.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we say changes. Our opinions change because we have conversations about these things. What we're saying is not set in stone. These aren't laws we're putting out. These are just our ideas about certain topics. And while it's good to listen to people and to take in what they're saying, you have to understand that they might not be 100% correct, and that's why it's important to have conversations. And our culture, in our schooling systems, it's very much like the teacher lectures to the students and the students retain that information. But I think a lot of the relationships we're trying to talk about are more of the conversational, where it's back and forth. It's not just one way. I think those are a lot more constructive than the I speak to you and then you just you listen to that and that's it. It's a lot more productive to be able to talk with your student, quote unquote. But you can get a lot more information. You can get information from them. Like you said, this changes. They can teach you one thing, you can teach them another. You used us as an example, and I think that's really good because you'll say something that you learned in one of your classes, which slightly overlaps with something I learned, and then I'll tell you about what I learned, and it's very back and forth.
And that, as friends, we're communicating what we've learned. And then when I'm telling you what I learned, I'm fulfilling a mentor role.
Yeah.
And then when you're like, oh, I learned this, you start fulfilling that mentor role. And we're kind of being friends, students, and mentors all at the same time in the matter of maybe a 20-minute conversation. And then as I teach the things that I'm learning, it makes it stick so much more. I come away understanding the concept a little bit better. And it just shows that learning truly does come from teaching.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about, different relationships in my life, throughout high school, throughout middle school and stuff. And, not all relationships are like that. Even with friends in high school who were good friends, very solid friends, this mentor-student relationship really wasn't an aspect of it. It was just that we were friends and it was great. But we lacked this student-mentor thing.
It's a little bit more depth, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this having a friend in school or wherever you are in life that, you just have fun and you talk about things, that make you happy and maybe not, but, it is good to have that conversation.
And I think one thing that we're going to get into now a little bit more is how culturally it's such a cultural idea of how we learn and interact with one another. And I know you have an example. I don't know if you want to get into that now about the differentiation between how different cultures approach, relationships.
Yeah, well, we can talk about, so in our culture, it's very, when you first meet someone, it's very superficial. It's very, I guess you could use the word fake, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. You're introducing each other. You don't know each other yet, so there's really not much there you can go on. But that's not the case for all cultures. There's, in one of my classes, we learned about the Western Apache, the tribe in the western part of the modern United States. They, even to this day, in their communities, when they're meeting someone for the first time, they don't talk. They do not feel obligated to introduce each other. If there's a group of friends or coworkers that come together that don't know each other, there's not a, in our culture, there's the point in the conversation where this is my friend Joe, and this, this is my, whatever, you're introducing each other. That does not happen in their culture. It's, and a lot of people that go into that culture, they think it's very rude. Like, oh, you didn't introduce yourself? Like, that's kind of rude. But they see it, they let the relationship build naturally. They don't need pressure. They don't need coaxing from the outside. They wait until the time is right to start talking to you. And I think that's very important to understand that, not everyone does it the same way, and there's value in that. There's value in that system because they're not fake about it. They're waiting until it's the right time to speak.
I think that also says a lot about being in this world that you and I have created, and other people in America. We live in this one certain way in this one certain world because it's what we've known our whole lives. But if we go to another culture and we introduce ourselves, hi, that might be seen as weird. It might be seen as, man, who is that guy? And it makes you think, oh, I'm going to try not to be so ignorant about other cultures now. I'm going to try to respect how other people operate in their society. And I need to understand that maybe my way of doing things isn't always the right way of doing things. Or even if it is the right way of doing things in my society, it's okay that this is different.
Yeah, we have very like ethnocentric view of things. And going back to this example, if you were to go into that society and say, "Hello, my name is Evan," that can be seen as fake. That can be seen as very fake. Like, okay, this guy, he has bad intentions. They can see that as a way to almost like coax you into something. They don't trust you after that. So yeah, it's good to go out and to understand that the way we do things isn't the way that everyone else does things, and that there is value in the way other people do it. It's very easy to look at those kind of customs and say, wow, that's primitive, or that's that's not the way it should be done. But in reality, we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn from the people around us, whether that's in our own lives or in like the broader world sense. There's a lot of different ways to build these relationships.
Learning about these different cultures, and I know you and I eventually immersing ourselves in other cultures will be a great way to, give ourselves a check and say, hey, my social location and my culture and where I was born and my class, it all affects how I see the world. And by immersing myself in other cultures and talking to other people and kind of exposing myself and educating myself to different types of people, it makes me learn that there is a difference between doing things, and that's what's so awesome about being a human.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for learning out there. And like you said, I definitely plan on going out and seeing these things firsthand, meeting people who don't exactly share the same culture that I do. There's a lot of value in that. And that goes back to the mentor thing. They have something to teach you. You have to be able to humble yourself and say, I come from Western culture, which values this, and this, but your culture doesn't. How do you live your life? What can I learn from you? That person is your mentor in that situation. That person is there to let you know that there are other ways to live.
Yeah, and I think with that, we can kind of wrap this around full circle and talk a little bit about how, since we've talked about the different types of relationships and different cultures, and I think if we can break it down to a basic human level about just good ways to build relationships with the act of listening. So my point on this, and something that I've been trying to practice a lot more frequently as I'm practicing mindfulness and meditation, is the act of active listening. And so most often when people are communicating with one another, you're not actually listening to what the person is saying to you. You are listening to the voice in your head interpret what the person is saying to you. And active listening is actually the ability to shut off that inner voice in your head and take in the words that are being said to you as what they are, the words that are being said to you. And I think that's actually a very beautiful gift to be able to give to somebody, is to truly listen to what they're saying and then formulate your response based off of that.
Yeah, when you're going about your day and you're you're talking with your friends, or in this case my roommate, and you're doing something and you make small talk, you don't have to necessarily drop everything you're doing and then just zero on what they're doing. You're allowed to go about your day to get things done, but to also have these conversations. But when it comes to these more in-depth personal conversations, it's important to make sure you're focusing on what they're saying. I know this gentleman from back home. He if you're talking to him about something, he'll close his eyes and listen to what you're saying, because it's very easy to get distracted by visual things, stuff going on, or hey, I need to do this, or on your desk or whatever. He closes his eyes and he listens to you. And I think that's a very important lesson. You don't have to go that far. You don't have to just close your eyes every time someone's talking to you. But I think as a concept, that's really important, to be able to focus on what someone's saying.
I think it's super cool too, because I can speak from just experience right now. I just got into this mode where I became super mindful of the situation that I'm in. And not that I wasn't present before, but I felt like I wasn't entirely here in this room in this moment. And as Evan was explaining how this guy was, he closes his eyes and listens, I kind of zoned into what he was saying, and I was taking his words in, and I stopped tapping my foot, and I kind of felt like everything slowed down for a second, and I was able to take it in as it was happening. And it feels good to be able to be present and to listen. And like I said earlier, if you take anything away from this podcast, I think it should be this: to the importance of listening to somebody has the value that it is a gift that you're giving somebody when you are listening to what they have to say, especially in relationship situations, like when somebody's expressing their distress to you and you listen to them. That's an extraordinary gift to give to somebody. And I think I value human communication so much that I'm studying it in school, and one of the biggest aspects is the listening component.
Yeah, giving someone that time of day, giving them your attention, that's huge. I think we all struggle with that. I know I definitely do. Being able to kind of put what I'm doing to the side and being able to focus on what someone's saying, that's huge. And like I said, I struggle with that. I think we all struggle with that a little bit. But if we can be mindful of that, and if we're able to say, this is something I need to work on, that's a step in the right direction. This can be with your coworkers, with your fellow students, with your roommate, whoever it is, your family. If you're able to, one conversation a day, focus in on what they're saying. Make sure you forget everything else, what's going on. You are listening to what they're saying. If you can do that once or twice a day, and then you can build on that, you'll start finding yourself doing that more often. It'll become a habit. If that becomes the habit, then you're in a good place. If that's the default, then you're definitely in the right direction.
One teaching that I've tried to take in is, don't use the person's speaking time as an opportunity to think about what you're going to say. So you listen, you reflect, and then you respond. It's kind of the steps and the processes of communicating with somebody. You listen to what they have to say, you reflect upon what they're saying, and then you respond.
Yeah, I think that's almost why arguments can be so volatile sometimes, because you're not thinking about what they're saying, you're thinking about what you're going to say back. And I just kind of thought about that, because when you're arguing, you're really not thinking about what they're saying. You kind of don't even care really what they're saying. It's, what can I say back that trumps that? What can I say back that puts me on top?
And isn't that such like a weird thing that exists in our society, that we kind of are breeding that kind of argument and hate in a way, where in reality most problems could be solved by taking time away and reflecting or understanding or listening. And it's just something to think about, and I think it's a big topic that kind of falls under our category of what we're interested in. And it's super important to be able to listen to what other people are saying and reflect and then respond.
Yeah. So if we can go the opposite direction of arguing, let's try to think about that going into the future. Let's not argue, and we can go more than that. Let's anti-argue. Let's make sure we're listening. Let's make sure we're focusing on what they're saying
and understanding
what they're saying, and being clarifying things. If you don't understand what someone's saying, don't just say, okay, well, I didn't understand that, let's move on. Let's say, hey, what do you mean by that? Or, hey, can you explain that a little more?
And don't act like we're perfect at it either. We're young. The last conversation we had about something, it was kind of a back and forth, throwing things back to each other, trying to trump the other person. And now we can take times like these to reflect that might not be the best way to solve a problem.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah.
I think that is a wonderful place to end. Listening, reflecting, and responding. So I encourage you guys to go out this week and be mindful of the conversations you're having. Maybe once a day, try to be completely present for a conversation. Listen to what other people have to say. Reflect upon what they said, and then respond. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed the more laid-back atmosphere and had something to take away. This week's end quote is a Jewish proverb, and it goes, "No one is as deaf as the man who will not listen."